Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Great set of morning sessions. What we're going to talk about now is kind of quantifying a lot of what you've seen. So you've heard people talk about high-impact use cases. You've heard people talk about change management. You probably say, well, what is a high-impact use case? How many are there? How do I get some? How much should I spend on change management? What does it matter if I do or I don't? So we're actually able to put numbers to that, and we'll go through that. And the way we do it is through this study. And the study was originally designed and still to help people on their AI journey. So we know not everyone is a leader like what we've showed you today. So how do we help you see where you are in your journey, and then how do you take the next best step? What are the next things you can do? You're all constrained by your budgets. You all have ROIs to prove. So that's really the whole goal of the study. And then the results of the study have really helped to frame the types of people that we invite, what they talk about, the messages that they deliver, so that you can see a real mix of what am I actually doing today that's returning results, and certainly you heard that. And then also, what is the very, very cutting edge? And so I think you've seen a little bit of that, and we'll talk more about it. So the way we run this study is, as you saw, we've gone out to about 140 countries. Would you flip back just one, just a bit better? We look across 4 different focus areas in terms of how we set those things up. We look at 9 major categories of enablers. And then after we look at that study, we have 4 archetypes. So leaders, obviously the best; executors, the people who get a lot done but don't spend quite as much. They're not getting as good of results as leaders, but they're very cost efficient. The planners who have built a lot of infrastructure, haven't got the results yet. And then the emergers. And a lot of you are spread somewhere in between.
Maybe just starting with the headline, right? The 4 groups that Bruce just spoke about. We see a significant difference in performance or performance uplift that leaders realize. And this is across like a whole range of KPIs, and we'll get into the specifics in a bit. But it's a significant difference, and it is a growing difference, right? So when we did it in 2021, there was about a 2.7x difference between leaders and the rest of the groups, right? And then by now, that difference has grown to about 4.7x, right? So we asked ourselves, right, is this sort of limited to specific areas, right? Or is it across the board, right? So what we did is we looked at about 20 to 25 different metrics ranging from design times, OE increases, quality costs, production costs, a whole bunch of metrics across plan, source, make, deliver, right? An end-to-end value chain. And we find that leaders to the bottom 50% of companies, the gap is almost uniform across all of the metrics, right? And that is where the 4.7x impact comes from. So the average leader sees about a 15% uplift in these metrics on average. It's low single digits for the bottom 50%, right? So that got us thinking on what really sets leaders apart, right? And what are some of the behaviors that is helping some of these organizations drive this uplift? So we have known about some of these factors earlier through the surveys that we have done since 2021 now, and there were 4 such factors. What we are starting to see is 2 new dimensions emerging. So I'll walk through all 6, right, one by one. So the 4 that we have known about, right? So executive sponsorship. So top-down backing of AI, end-to-end AI programs, right? Starting with the C-suite, almost one of the most critical drivers, right? That drives success. The network of partnerships. So partnerships with the academia, partnerships with startups, even cross-functional partnerships within the enterprise across functions, right? All critical to driving some of the outcomes that we just saw on the previous page. This whole ability to work cross-functionally is another key differentiator, right? A lot of leaders have set up COEs, right? And those COEs are a great mechanism of accelerating impact from AI and deploying them across functions, whether it is sales or whether it is manufacturing, supply chain, procurement, and everything else, right? And then finally, data management, right? Like figuring out how to really leverage the organization's data. The two factors that we are starting to see emerge in 2026 are generative AI usage, right? We see almost a multiple impact from generative AI usage versus using traditional AI ML type models, right? And then the last one is change management. We see a disproportionate amount of investment from leaders in change management, right? And what we will do for the rest of this session is really hone in on what are people doing in Gen AI, how does Gen AI really interact with change management, and we'll just walk through some of the specifics there. So if you think about the interaction between change management and generative AI, what we find is that doing both creates a multiplier effect, right? So what this chart shows on one axis is you have how much is the change management budget? Is it greater than 20% of your overall AI budget, or is it less than 20%? The other axis is there a focus on generative AI as a technology or not? And it's a simple yes or a no. The top right quadrant, we see that the number of metrics on which there is a significant improvement, which we define as greater than 10% improvement in a year, right, is you see that the large number of KPIs, right, see that improvement. So more at scale, right? Much lower numbers across the remaining three quadrants, right? And of course, like the least is if you don't do change management and don't do Gen AI, right? Also, what is interesting to see is that 40% of the Gen AI users also allocate about 20% plus of their budgets to change management. So it clearly points to a maturity in an underlying operating model and a better understanding of what are the drivers that get you to value, right? So clearly, Gen AI usage is important. So we asked ourselves, what are people doing with generative AI, right? And what is emerging is essentially four themes, right, of well-scaled use cases. There is stuff around process simplification. So this is things like document authoring, task automation. There is workforce augmentation. So this is where all the co-pilots, support for various workflows like root cause identification falls in. There is design, and then there is service, and service is essentially customer service, right? We are seeing these use cases emerge across the end-to-end value chain. So as you can see from the number of green ticks across design, plan, source, make, deliver, that people are starting to take more of an end-to-end view to these use cases. But what is also interesting is that several of the use cases that we discussed in the room are not yet on this slide, right? So for instance, there was discussion around the negotiation co-pilot or the procurement use cases. They have not made it yet here, but we expect them to come. So we're still only scratching the surface, but in scratching the surface, what we are seeing is already significant impact.
And actually, before you pop off of that slide, I want to say, if anyone wants to take a photo of one slide, this is kind of captures it in one page of who some of these people have already spoken or will speak, what use cases are they working on across the study, how many people are doing those things, and then where are they doing them on the value chain. So this is the slide you go back to your boss and say, we're ahead, behind, whatever, because this is what leaders are doing. You will be able to see this in the presentation, but I thought I'd point that out, that this is a super important slide.
Yeah, and I think what this slide then leads into is what is the impact from doing all of that, right? And this chart shows across 5 dimensions: service level, design, labor productivity, demand accuracy, and speed to market. What is the impact that a generative AI user, which is typically a leader, is seeing versus the rest of the pack, right? And you can see that the impact ranges are quite significant already, despite the fact that a lot of the use cases that were discussed are yet not on the slide, right? So we only expect this to increase going forward, right? I think what the other thing that you will see is that all the metrics here on which the improvements are operational metrics, right? Demand accuracy, you can't find that on a P&L or a balance sheet specifically, right? So what we expect going forward is, now that the operational improvements have been realized, it will start sort of flowing through to the P&L and the balance sheet, right? The budgets will start to get adjusted, and we will start to see those uplifts. And we think that there will be four sort of key drivers, right, that enable that, right? And number one is of course talent, right? So there are two aspects to this, that newer roles, right? You need data scientists, digital translators, data engineers to now be embedded in traditional business functions, right? And investing in these new roles will be critical. But then also upskilling the rest of the organization to be able to use the tools that are being developed, and scaling them, right? The next one is end-to-end redesign, right? And it's really this notion of not treating AI or frankly any digital tool as a tool or a technology, but really thinking through the workflow, like what is the work that needs to happen? What portion of that can be done by agents? Where does the human in the loop need to be? And really reimagining in that new sort of end-to-end workflow, what does our governance look like? Do we need to meet once a week or once a month? Does an integrated business planning cycle need to run the way it ran for the last 20 years? Do we need to move to almost a weekly cadence now? It's really thinking about the ways of working that in our view will unlock value, and it's this notion of end-to-end redesign. The third is data availability, right? And I think one of almost the universal comments that we see from the companies that are in the bottom 50% of scaling AI impact is we don't have the data. We don't have the data to do it. Our systems are not good enough. We can't overlay AI on bad data. It is garbage in, garbage out. The unlock that leaders have found is that they are using AI to actually fix data, right? So if your data is actually fragmented across Excels and a bunch of documents in SharePoint, they are using generative AI to convert that unstructured data into structured data to scale AI use cases better, right? So really, we are starting to see that shift in mindset of moving beyond data as a limitation to actually using AI as the opportunity to fix your data, right? And then the last thing, and it's last but by no means that it's probably the most important, I would argue, on this list, is this concept of it being business-led, right? So this is, many organizations traditionally have worked in this model where business defines the requirements, gets handed over to IT, somebody builds the solution, and then 2 years later, after working with 3 different vendors, going through a lot of change management and organizational upskilling, you have something, right? That model, I think, is fundamentally disrupted at this point, right? It's really this concept. The leaders are deploying pods, right? These pods are led by the business leader who wants to drive a transformation, and has representation from people from every function, right? It has IT representation, it has data engineers, data scientists, so the analytics function. It even has HR and finance to make sure that impact flows through, HR to enable change management and some of the other concepts that we spoke about. And it's really this business-led transformation which is run by pods, right, that we see at leaders, which is actually driving the most significant impact versus the traditional sort of siloed operating model. I think I'll hand back to Bruce, right, to talk through some of the avenues where you can actually go through some of the details of this research.
Absolutely. So, yes, we've published several articles. I think we really featured the one on the right quite heavily last year, what companies succeeding with AI do differently. We hope to see more of you presenting here in the future on that particular topic. We're working on a next article now, but you can go to our website and find these articles to really add some depth. But one of the things that we do to make it valuable to companies to complete this study, because it's a fair amount of work, we can generate playbooks. And so what is the playbook? The playbook gives you an idea of where you stand today. So I mentioned this earlier, the 4 archetypes. And the way we come up with those 4 archetypes is we plot impact, the results that you've gotten, against the enablers, essentially the money that you've spent, the things that you've done, the people you've hired, how you've trained them, the data you collect. And we use that to create those 4 archetypes. And then we define the leaders here, and then we can look in more detail at what the leaders do and show you the red dot, how you relate to leaders. And then the next step is we help give you a roadmap, but I'll give you a little more detail on how we define things. So this was that KPI that Arnav showed you. This is what leaders do. This is the % improvement they get in, say, design time reduction. You saw a couple of examples of that today. This royal blue are the bottom 2 quartiles. And then in this case, this is how this particular company answered, are the green dots. So we give you a chance to see where you stand on multiple metrics. And then we give you a roadmap, which is across the 9 dimensions that we talked about of, the people you hire, how much you spend, the types of problems you choose to work on, how much data you've collected, where do you store it, those types of things. We let you compare yourselves to the leaders, planners, executors. Obviously, the darker blue colors are better. And so we show you your performance. And then we specifically show you where you should focus first. Where are you kind of farthest behind? And we tell you, if you're bright blue, you're aligned with leaders. So that's an area you're already doing well. And there are some other areas where you might find some gaps where you should be doing some work. And then we specifically break down, say, data execution. Here, we show you where you stand. In this case, you're in good shape. But there are still a few things you could clear up. You could do a better job with validating your data. In this case, maybe you could give operators, right? Where this company's not giving operators access to data to make real-time decisions. So we give you that kind of guidance. And since we do like to use AI to help with AI, this playbook, it's almost 50 pages with the first version or the full version. We generate this with very, very well-defined LLM calls, GPT calls. So that at scale, we can deliver this a really quality product to you. Now, I will say we do human in the loop. So McKinsey and MIT do look at every result so to make sure it's not hallucinating. But we really have spent a lot of time trying to make this a very useful tool. Here's the QR code. We would love to have more people participate. So please go to that link. It gives you more information. It's free. So what we want is the data to make our samples better, to do a better job of sensing where the industry is going and bring, our ultimate goals is to help AI implementation in manufacturing and operations so that we can be more productive. So thank you very much.
If you can get the QR code slide back up so that people can scan them, that would be great.